At midnight, Richard Holt watched his maid steal from his kitchen and followed her into a truth that would destroy everything he'd built. She wasn't a thief. She was a daughter trying to keep her dying mother alive, with his drug, at his price, that he made impossible to afford. He thought he was chasing a secret. He had no idea the secret was him. Hey family, welcome to my story channel. Please subscribe and give this video a like, it truly means the world to us. Don't forget to share it with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you never miss a new upload. Thank you so much for the support. Now, sit back, relax, and let's dive into the story. At 11:47 p.m., Richard Holt reviewed his security footage, and what he saw made his jaw tighten. There she was, Clara, his maid of 3 years, standing in his kitchen in the dark, wrapping leftover bread, cold chicken, and fruit into a cloth bag. Slowly, carefully, like she had done it before, because she had. Richard rewound the footage. Tuesday, Thursday, last Friday. Every time same quiet movements, same bag, same back door closing softly behind her. He sat back in his leather chair and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Anger. Not the loud kind, the cold kind, the kind that doesn't shout, it calculates. Richard Holt had not built a billion-dollar pharmaceutical empire by letting small things slide. He believed that every crack, no matter how small, became a collapse if ignored. He had fired executives for less. He had cut business partners loose for less. And now his maid was stealing from his kitchen. He picked up his phone and almost called his head of security. His thumb hovered. Then he stopped. No, something made him put the phone down. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way Clara moved on that screen, not frantically, not guiltily, but almost gently, like she was doing something sacred. What is she doing with it? He told himself he didn't care. He went to bed. He stared at the ceiling for 2 hours. He cared. The next evening, Richard skipped his usual 8 p.m. call with his board. He sat in his car, a blacked-out Range Rover parked across from the staff exit, engine off, waiting. At 8:23 p.m., Clara walked out. She was a small woman, neat gray coat, the cloth bag hanging from her right hand. She didn't take a cab or a bus. She walked. Richard followed slowly, headlights off at first, then blending into traffic as she moved deeper into the city. She walked for 22 minutes. He watched her turn into Barlow Street, a neighborhood of cracked pavements and laundry lines between windows. She stopped at a yellow building with paint peeling off the walls like old skin. She pulled out a key. She went inside. Richard parked and waited. Through a ground-floor window, a faint light came on. He stepped out of the car and moved closer, just enough to see through the thin curtain. Clara was sitting on the edge of a bed. In the bed lay a woman, old, thin, propped up against 2 pillows. Clara was unwrapping the food carefully, arranging it on a small plate. Then she began to spoon-feed her. The old woman's hand reached up and touched Clara's face. Richard stood on that cracked pavement in his $4,000 suit and felt something loosen in his chest, something he couldn't name and didn't want to. He walked back to his car. He drove home in complete silence. He poured himself a whiskey, sat in the dark, and asked himself a question he hadn't asked in a very long time. When did I become a man who follows his maid home? But underneath that question was a quieter, more dangerous one that would keep him awake until 4 a.m. Who is that woman in the bed? Richard Holt was not a man who did things halfway. The next morning, he called in a favor from an old contact and had a full background check on Clara Mendez sitting on his desk by noon. He told himself it was standard, protective, the right thing to do when an employee broke trust. He opened the file. Clara Mendez, 41. No criminal record. No debt defaults. Church volunteer. Employed at 3 other households before his all-glowing references. One consistent note across all of them: trustworthy, quiet, hard-working. He flipped the page. One dependent. Mother Rosa Mendez, 67. Current address: 14 Barlow Street, apartment 2B. The yellow building. He kept reading. Rosa Mendez, retired seamstress. Diagnosed 14 months ago with stage 3 pulmonary fibrosis, a progressive, incurable lung disease. Current prescribed medication, Holtazine SR. Monthly cost, $2,400. Richard stopped reading. He read that line again. Holtazine SR. His drug. His company's drug. A medication Holt Pharma had acquired 4 years ago from a small biotech firm and repriced from $180 a month to $2,400. Richard had been in that boardroom. He had approved that number. He remembered the exact words he used. The market will absorb it. He closed the file. He stood up, walked to his window. 42 floors below, the city moved like it always did, completely indifferent. His phone rang. It was Margaret, his wife. "Are you coming to the Harrington dinner tonight?" she asked. "Yes," he said. He was staring at nothing. "You sound strange. What's wrong?" "Nothing. I'll be ready at 7. He hung up and opened the file again. There was one more document clipped to the back. Printed letter. His assistant must have pulled it from Holt Pharma's records. It was dated 8 months ago, addressed to Holt Pharma Patient Assistance Division. He read it slowly. "My name is Clara Mendez. I am writing on behalf of my mother, Rosa Mendez, who has been prescribed Holtazine SR for pulmonary fibrosis. The monthly cost of $2,400 is beyond anything we can manage. My mother worked her whole life. She is a good woman. She deserves a chance. I am asking, with great respect, if there is any program that could help us afford this medication. I will work extra hours. I will do whatever is needed. Please. She is all I have." At the bottom, stamped in red ink, "Application denied." Richard put the letter down on his desk. He sat very still for a long time. Then he opened his laptop and pulled up Holt Pharma's internal records. He searched for the patient assistance program. He found the denial list. 641 names in the last year alone. He scrolled slowly. Mendez, Rosa. Denied. Case handler, T. Brooks. Reviewed by Senior Management. Senior Management. That was him. He hadn't personally reviewed it, of course he hadn't. He reviewed policy, not people. That was the system he built. Efficient. Scalable. Profitable. He thought about Clara. Standing in his kitchen at midnight, in the dark, wrapping bread in a cloth so her mother could eat. And he thought about the letter. "I will do whatever is needed. Please." He closed the laptop. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Richard Holt felt something cold move through him that had nothing to do with power. Felt a lot like shame. Clara didn't know she was being watched. She arrived at Richard's penthouse at 7 a.m. the next morning. Same as always, quietly, professionally, invisibly. That was the job. Be there but don't be seen. She made his coffee, set his newspaper, polished the counter that was already clean. Richard walked into the kitchen at 7:30. He sat at the island. Clara placed his coffee in front of him without a word. He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in 3 years. She had tired eyes. Not sad exactly, but the eyes of someone who hadn't slept deeply in a very long time. There were lines around her mouth that came not from age but from holding things in. "Clara," he said. She looked up. "Yes, sir. How's your family?" A pause. Small, but he caught it. "Fine, thank you, sir." "Your mother, she's well?" Another pause. Longer this time. Clara set down the cloth she was holding. "She's managing," she said carefully. Richard nodded slowly. "Good." That was it. He picked up his newspaper. Clara went back to work. But her hands, Richard noticed, were not quite steady. Later that morning, Clara was cleaning the east corridor when Richard's wife Margaret appeared. Margaret Holt was a tall woman with perfect posture and the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. She stopped when she saw Clara. "I need you to redo the guest bathroom," Margaret said. "I had people over yesterday and it's not up to standard." Clara nodded. "Of course, ma'am." "And Clara," Margaret lowered her voice, "Richard has been acting odd. Has he said anything to you? Anything unusual?" Clara looked at her. "No, ma'am. He only asked about my family this morning." Margaret's expression shifted. Something moved behind her eyes. "He asked about your family," she repeated. "Yes, ma'am." Margaret walked away without another word. That evening, Clara sat beside her mother's bed. Rosa was having a better day. Sitting up, eating the food Clara had brought, her dark eyes sharp and warm. "You look worried," Rosa said. "I'm fine, Mama." "Clara." Rosa's voice was gentle but firm. "I know your face. Every version of it." Clara put down the fork and looked at her hands. "He asked about you today." "My employer." Rosa raised an eyebrow. "The billionaire?" "He's never asked me anything personal in 3 years. Not once." Rosa was quiet for a moment. "Maybe he's changing." "Men like him don't change, Mama." "How do you know what kind of man he is?" "I know what his company did," Clara said quietly. "I wrote to them 8 months ago. Begged them for help with your medication." She paused. "They said no." Rosa closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, there was no bitterness in them, only something that looked like forgiveness, which Clara found both beautiful and infuriating. "You never told me that," Rosa said. "I didn't want you to feel like a burden." "Clara." Rosa reached out and held her daughter's hand. "I have been many things in my life. A burden has never been one of them." Clara laughed the sudden, helpless kind, and then her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "I'm scared, Mama," she whispered. Rosa squeezed her hand. "I know, baby, but fear means you still have something to lose. That's not a bad thing." Richard hadn't planned to call Daniel. But at 9 p.m., with 2 fingers of whiskey and Clara's denied letter still open on his desk, he found himself dialing his son's number. It rang 4 times. "Dad." Daniel's voice was flat. "Careful. I need to see you." Silence. "Then why? Can we just meet?" "Lunch tomorrow." Another pause. "Is something wrong with you?" "Medically? No. I want to talk." "You want to talk?" Daniel let that sit in the air a moment. "You haven't wanted to talk in 2 years." "Daniel." "Fine. Tomorrow. But I picked the place." Daniel picked a diner 3 blocks from the Holt Pharma protest site. Richard walked in wearing no tie, the closest he came to casual. Daniel was already there, sitting in a corner booth, wearing a jacket with a protest badge pinned to it that read, "People over profit." They looked at each other. Richard sat down. A waitress poured coffee. Neither of them spoke until she left. "You look tired," Daniel said. "You look like you're trying to provoke me," Richard said, nodding at the badge. "I'm not. It's just what I believe." Daniel wrapped both hands around his mug. "So, what did you want to talk about?" Richard reached into his jacket and slid a folded paper across the table. It was Clara's letter. Daniel read it. His expression didn't change much, but his jaw tightened. "Where did you get this?" "She works for me." Daniel looked up. "This woman is your maid?" "Yes." "And her mother is on Holtazine SR?" "Yes." Daniel put the letter down slowly. "And you denied her?" "The program denied her. I didn't personally." "Dad." Daniel's voice cut clean and quiet. "You built the system. You set the prices. You approved the policy. When the system does something, you did it." Richard said nothing. "Do you know," Daniel continued, leaning forward, "how many people were denied by that program last year alone? 641. I know that number because I've been tracking it for 18 months. We're actually planning to publish it next month." He paused. "I didn't know one of them made your coffee every morning." The words landed like a slow punch. "I need to know what to do," Richard said. Daniel stared at him. "Are you serious right now?" "I'm asking you. You're the one who has all the moral answers." "This isn't about moral answers, Dad. This is about a woman whose mother is dying because you decided a drug should cost $2,400 a month." Daniel's voice stayed quiet, but the emotion underneath it was enormous. "You want to know what to do? Start by understanding that this isn't a PR problem. This is a human being." Silence. Richard looked down at his coffee. "She's never asked me for a single thing," he said quietly. 3 years. Not once." Daniel watched his father for a long moment. Then, carefully, she wrote that letter 8 months ago. She asked then, "The system just made sure you never had to hear it." Richard picked up the letter and folded it back into his pocket. Neither of them spoke again for almost a minute. Then Daniel said something he hadn't said in 2 years. "Are you going to fix it?" Richard met his son's eyes. "I don't know yet," he said. And for the first time in a long time, that honesty was the most respectable thing he'd done all week. Richard drove to Barlow Street on a Thursday afternoon. He had no plan, no speech prepared. He just drove until he was parked outside the yellow building with the peeling paint, sitting in his car with the engine off for a full 10 minutes. Then he got out. He buzzed apartment 2B. A woman's voice crackled through the intercom. Old, warm, a little breathless. "Who is it?" "My name is Richard. He paused. "I know your daughter." A long pause. "Come up." Rosa Mendez opened the door in a housecoat and slippers, an oxygen tube running beneath her nose, her silver hair pinned neatly back. She looked at him, all 6 feet of him in his expensive coat, and didn't seem the least bit intimidated. "You're the one who employs my Clara," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Come in then. I just made tea." The apartment was small enough to cross in 8 steps. But it was immaculate. A hand-sewn tablecloth on the table. Photographs on every wall. A small plant on the windowsill that someone watered faithfully. Rosa poured 2 cups and sat across from him like she was hosting a president. "She doesn't know you're here?" Rosa asked. "No." Rosa nodded slowly. "She'd be furious." "Probably. She's proud. Too proud sometimes." Rosa smiled. "She gets it from me." Richard looked around the room. His eyes landed on a photograph, Clara, maybe 12 years old, in a school uniform, holding a certificate, grinning ear to ear. "She won a regional spelling competition," Rosa said, following his gaze. "First prize. She was so happy that day." A pause. "She was going to be a teacher, you know, before life had other plans." "What happened?" Richard asked. "Her father left when she was 15. I got sick for the first time, different illness. I seemed to collect them." Rosa chuckled softly. "Clara took work. Real work. She sent me money before she fed herself." She looked at him steadily. "That's who my daughter is." Richard sat with that. "How are you managing?" he asked. "With the medication?" Rosa set her cup down carefully. "Some months Clara finds a way. Some months I take half the dose and hope." She said it without drama, without self-pity, the way people talk about weather. Richard felt something in him physically shift. "That's dangerous," he said. "Yes." Rosa looked at him. "But what is the alternative?" He had no answer. They sat in the kind of silence that isn't uncomfortable, the kind that means something is being understood without words. Then Rosa asked him something no one had asked Richard in years. "Are you a happy man, Richard?" He blinked. "I'm successful." "That's not what I asked." He looked at her. This woman in slippers with a tube in her nose and a tablecloth on her table and nothing to offer but tea. "No," he said. "I don't think I am." Rosa nodded like she already knew. Sometimes God uses small things to remind big men of what matters. She picked up her cup again. "Maybe that's why Clara works for you." Richard left Barlow Street 40 minutes later. He sat in his car and pressed both hands flat against the steering wheel. He thought about the boardroom, the pricing meeting, the number on the whiteboard, $2,400, and how easily he had said yes. How clean it had felt. How far removed from a woman drinking half her medication and hoping. He pulled out his phone and called Daniel. "I'm going to fix it," he said. "Clara found out on a Friday." One of Richard's assistants slipped mentioned offhandedly that Mr. Holt had visited Barlow Street. Clara was in the kitchen when she heard it, and she stopped so completely, so suddenly, that the glass in her hand nearly dropped. She set it down. She walked straight to Richard's office and knocked. "Come in." She opened the door. Richard looked up from his desk. He saw her face and knew immediately. "You went to see her," Clara said. Her voice was low and controlled, but her eyes were burning. Richard stood slowly. "Clara, you had no right." Her voice cracked at the edges. "No right. She is not part of my employment. She is not your business. She is my mother, and this is my life, and you." She stopped, took a breath. Steady. Steady. I don't want your pity. It's not pity. Then what is it? Her eyes were blazing now. You looked into my file. You read my private letter. You followed me home. You went to her apartment. What exactly do you call that? Richard said nothing. I stole food from your kitchen, she said. If you want to fire me, fire me. But do not stand there and pretend you care about us. Men like you don't care. Men like you see numbers, not people. Clara, I wrote to your company 8 months ago. I got on my knees in that letter. Do you know what they sent back? A stamp. A red stamp. Denied. No phone call. No explanation. Just denied. Her voice dropped. My mother takes half her medication because I cannot afford the full dose. Half, Mr. Holt. And that medication exists because of you. Richard crossed the room slowly and stopped a few feet from her. You're right, he said. She blinked. Everything you just said, you're right. I didn't see people. I saw markets. He paused. I read your letter, Clara. All of it. And I have been sitting with it for a week because I don't know how to carry what it made me feel. Clara stared at him. The fire in her eyes hadn't gone out, but something else had arrived beside it. Uncertainty. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Richard continued. I'm not asking for anything. But I went to your mother because I needed to understand what I had done. Not as a policy, as a person. Silence stretched between them. And, Clara asked quietly. She gave me tea, he said, and asked me if I was happy. Something crossed Clara's face, something between exasperation and love. That's my mother, she whispered. She's remarkable, Richard said. You both are. Clara looked away. She pressed her fingers to her mouth for a moment, composing herself. I don't want charity, she said finally. I want her medication, properly, not as a favor from a guilty man, as a right. I know, Richard said. That's why I'm not calling it charity. She looked at him sharply. I'm calling it a policy failure, he said. And I'm going to fix the policy. Clara stood very still. Don't make a promise you won't keep, she said. She's already running out of time. I know. Richard held her gaze. I know. The emergency board meeting was called for a Monday at 9 a.m. 9 people around a glass table, all of them watching Richard walk in with the expression of people who sensed something different about him, something that made them uncomfortable. He didn't sit immediately. He stood at the head of the table and placed 2 documents in front of him. Clara's letter, and the denial list, 641 names. I want to restructure the patient assistance program, he said. Immediately. Silence. Then Gerald Marsh, CFO, leaned forward. Richard, we restructured it 18 months ago. We restricted it. I want to expand it. More silence. Then everyone started talking at once. The margins on Holtazine. We'd be setting a precedent. Shareholders will. Enough. Richard's voice cut the room clean. Everyone stopped. He picked up the denial list and held it up. 641 people denied last year. People who cannot afford a medication we sell for $2,400. A medication that cost us less than $200 to develop per unit. He set it down. I want pricing reviewed. I want the assistance thresholds restructured. And I want reprocessing of every denial from the last 12 months. Gerald removed his glasses. Richard, this will cost us. I know what it costs. Richard looked around the table slowly. Do any of you know what it costs when someone takes half their medication because they can't afford the full dose? Do you know what that does to a body? Silence. No, because we don't measure that. We measure margin. This is a business, Gerald said. Yes, Richard replied. And businesses are made of people. We forgot that. Margaret had been sitting quietly at the end of the table. She was on the board as a non-executive voice. She spoke now carefully. Richard, if this becomes public the way you framed it, it implies the company acted wrongly. That's a liability. We did act wrongly, Margaret. The room went very still. Margaret looked at him for a long moment. I need to speak with you privately. After the meeting. Richard, after the meeting. The vote was split. 5 in favor of restructuring. 4 against, including Gerald and 2 others who immediately began quiet side conversations as people filed out. In the corridor, Margaret caught his arm. "What is happening to you?" she asked. "I'm doing the right thing. You're running a company, not a charity." "Margaret." He faced her. "I followed my maid home. I read the letter she wrote begging us for help. I sat in her mother's apartment and drank tea with a dying woman who takes half her medication every day because of a number I approved in a boardroom." He paused. "And you're worried about optics?" Margaret stared at him. "You've changed," she said. "No," he replied quietly. "I've remembered." She left. He watched her go. His phone buzzed. "Daniel, heard you called the board meeting. Is it real this time?" Richard typed back. "It's real. 3 seconds. I'll believe it when I see it. Come to my office at 5. Bring your program proposal. We'll work on it together." A long pause. Then, "Okay." Richard stood alone in the corridor. For the first time in years, he felt like he was standing on solid ground. The restructuring took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of legal meetings, revised budgets, board resistance, leaked stories to financial press, and one very public resignation by Gerald Marsh, who called the changes financially irresponsible sentimentalism in his exit letter. 3 board members quietly threatened to sell their shares. Margaret moved into the guest house, and through all of it Richard kept going. Rosa Mendez received her first full prescription in week 3. Clara called Richard's office at 8 a.m. on the day it arrived. "She has her medication," Clara said. "Good." A pause. "She cried," Clara said. Her voice was barely steady. "She held the bottle and she cried." "My mother doesn't cry." Richard sat at his desk and said nothing for a moment. "How is she doing?" "Better than last week." A breath. "Not cured, but she has more time." "Clara." He stopped. "Yes. I'm sorry it took me this long." A long pause on her end. "You should be," she said. "Not unkindly, just honestly. But thank you for getting there." Daniel came to the penthouse for dinner on a Wednesday. Not a scheduled meeting. Not a work call. Dinner. Richard cooked badly and they ate pasta that was slightly overcooked and talked about things they hadn't talked about in years. Daniel's work. Richard's father, who had also been a proud, inflexible man. The choices that harden people over time, and whether those choices can be reversed. "Do you think what I did is enough?" Richard asked. Daniel poured more water. "You changed the policy. That helps 600 people this year, maybe more next year." He paused. "It's a start. Is that what you're going to tell your colleagues?" "I'm going to tell them that pressure works," Daniel said simply. "And that sometimes a man surprises you." Richard looked at his son across the table. "I wasn't there enough," Richard said quietly. "When you were young." Daniel was quiet. "I know," he said eventually. "I don't have an excuse. I know that too." Daniel met his eyes. "But you're here now. That counts for something." It wasn't forgiveness, full and complete. It was something more realistic than that. It was a door left open. 6 weeks after the restructuring was announced, Richard drove to Barlow Street on a Saturday afternoon. Rosa was sitting up, better color in her face, an unfinished piece of embroidery in her lap. She saw him and smiled, the full, warm, uncomplicated smile of someone who holds no account. "You came back," she said. "I brought bread this time," he said, holding up a bag. Rosa laughed. A real laugh, deep and genuine. "Sit down then." He sat at the small table with the hand-sewn tablecloth. Clara came from the kitchen with cups and looked at him, not warmly yet, not coldly either, just steadily, like someone watching a tree that might grow in the right direction, given enough time. She sat down, poured the tea. Outside, the street was loud and alive. Children somewhere, a radio in another apartment, the ordinary noise of people living their lives. Richard looked around the small room. The photographs, the plant, the embroidery. More life in this room, he thought, than in every floor of my building. Rosa reached across and patted his hand once. "Good man," she said. He didn't correct her. For the first time in a long time, he hoped she was right. Some men change because they have to. Richard Holt changed because a woman carried bread through the dark, and he was brave enough to wonder why. If the story moved you like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for stories that make you feel, think, and grow. We'll see you in the next one.